My name is Patricia, 58 years old, and I never thought my only daughter would call me an old lady and ban me from her wedding. After losing my husband when Amanda was just 6, I worked tirelessly as a real estate agent to give her everything. That beautiful colonial house I bought when she was 10 was meant to be her wedding gift. Instead, it became my leverage when I finally stood up for myself. I sold it silently and watched her perfect world crumble from a distance. If you're watching this story about how a mother's love turned into necessary tough life lessons, please like and subscribe. I'd love to know where you're watching from in the comments below. Now let me tell you how I went from doormat to dignified. I spent 32 years building my career in real estate while raising Amanda alone. When cancer took my husband Michael so suddenly, I promised myself our daughter would never feel the absence of opportunities, despite having only one parent. We lived modestly at first in a small apartment where I worked extra hours and weekends to save for something better. By the time Amanda turned 10, I had saved enough for the down payment on a beautiful colonial-style house in a good neighborhood with excellent schools. I still remember her excited squeal when she ran up the stairs to claim the bedroom with the bay window overlooking our small but charming backyard. Those early years in the house were filled with happiness and gratitude. "This is our forever home, Mum," she told me once while we planted tulip bulbs in the front garden. I believed her. I believed we were building something meaningful together. As a single mother, I made sure Amanda had everything her friends with 2 parents had sometimes, at the cost of my own needs. Private school tuition meant I drove my old Honda long past when it should have been replaced. Dance lessons, horseback riding, and summer camps took priority over home renovations. Designer clothes for her teenage years meant I shopped sales racks for myself. I never complained because I took pride in her opportunities. The first signs of entitlement appeared gradually during her high school years. At 16, she cried for 3 days when I bought her a used Volkswagen instead of the new BMW she wanted for her birthday. I explained that college savings came first, but the sulking lasted weeks. When friends commented on our modest home during parties, I noticed her quick changes of subject and embarrassed expressions. "Mum, could you maybe wear something more current when my friends come over?" she asked before her 17th birthday party. I had spent hours preparing homemade food. The comment stung, but I brushed it off as teenage self-consciousness. Despite these warning signs, I continued putting money aside for her future. When Amanda was accepted to an expensive private university, I used a portion of my retirement savings to ensure she graduated debt-free. During those college years, our relationship seemed to improve with the distance. Her calls home were infrequent but pleasant, and holidays together were mostly harmonious. Then, during her junior year, Amanda met James. From a wealthy family with old money, his parents owned multiple properties and a vacation home in the Hamptons. The first time Amanda brought him home during spring break, I noticed the way his eyes traveled around our home, assessing and silently judging. Still, I prepared a special dinner and tried to make him feel welcome. "Your home has such character, Mrs. Edwards," he said in a tone that made clear it wasn't a compliment. That summer, I was invited to the Hamiltons' summer house to meet James's parents, Frederick and Catherine. From the moment I arrived in my modest rental car, I felt the subtle condescension. Catherine's eyes lingered on my department store dress while she wore designer labels. Frederick asked pointed questions about my small business, though being a realtor for 3 decades was hardly a hobby. "Real estate must be such interesting work," Catherine said during dinner, "though I imagine it's challenging in your price bracket." I swallowed my pride and maintained my dignity, telling myself this was about Amanda's happiness, not my ego. But as months passed, I watched my daughter transform around James and his family. Her accent subtly shifted to match their New England tone. Her clothing style changed to mirror Catherine's conservative, expensive taste. Worst of all, Amanda began to look at me through their eyes. During Amanda's senior year, I decided to put money into renovating our family home. If she and James decided to settle nearby after graduation, I wanted to gift them the house as a wedding present. I secretly hired contractors, updated the kitchen bathrooms, and replaced the roof. I converted the basement into a proper family room and had the hardwood floors refinished. Every improvement was made with Amanda's future in mind. What I didn't realize was how quickly her future was being written without me in mind at all. Amanda's engagement announcement came as a shock, not because it was unexpected, but because I learned about it on social media. My own daughter had gotten engaged 3 days earlier, and I discovered it scrolling through Instagram while eating lunch at my desk. The photo showed her and James toasting champagne with his parents on their yacht. My heart sank, not from the news itself, but from the realization I hadn't been included in this important moment. When I called to congratulate her, Amanda seemed surprised by my hurt feelings. "Mom, it just happened spontaneously while we were sailing. James had planned to ask me during the trip, and his parents were there. It wasn't some big planned thing," she explained dismissively. "I would have loved to be part of such an important moment," I said, trying to keep disappointment from my voice. "Well, you don't really sail and you get seasick, so it worked out better this way," she replied. The conversation moved quickly to ring details and preliminary wedding thoughts. 2 weeks later, Amanda finally visited home. I expected to have heart-to-heart conversations about wedding plans, but she arrived with a leather-bound wedding planner already filled with ideas. "Catherine found the most amazing wedding coordinator," Amanda gushed. "The Hamiltons are covering most expenses since, well, they have connections to all the best vendors." When I offered input on possible local venues that held sentimental value, Amanda barely glanced up from her planner. "Mum, we're obviously getting married at the Westbrook Country Club. Frederick's family has been members for generations," she said with a slight eye roll. "Catherine has already spoken with their event coordinator." I tried another approach. "I've been saving for your wedding since you were little. I'd like to contribute significantly. This is important to me." This got her attention, though not in the way I hoped. "That's sweet, Mum. Maybe you could cover the rehearsal dinner," though Catherine was thinking the Greymore for that, which might be, "Well, we can talk about something in your budget." The pattern continued over the next several months. I wrote a generous check as my contribution, but it brought me no voice in the planning. At every turn, my suggestions were deemed too quaint, too simple, or too ordinary. The subtle criticisms of my taste extended to criticism of me personally. "Mum, for the wedding, I think we should get you a professional stylist," Amanda said, during a lunch that was supposed to be about a mother-daughter wedding dress shopping, but had turned into a meeting with Catherine and the wedding planner Margot. "My hair and makeup. Of course, whatever the bridal party is doing," I replied. "No, I mean for your outfit, and maybe some coaching on presentation. The Hamiltons' friends are very particular, and I just want everything to be perfect." Margot, the wedding planner, barely attempted to hide her smirk. Catherine nodded approvingly at my daughter. I discovered I had been excluded from the actual wedding dress shopping when I called Amanda to confirm our plans, only to learn she had already purchased her gown during a shopping trip with Catherine 3 days earlier. "Catherine knows the designer personally," Amanda explained. "It was a last-minute opportunity. I couldn't pass it up." The final straw in the planning phase came when I saw the seating chart. My brother Thomas and his family, Amanda's only relatives on my side, were seated at a back table near the kitchen while distant Hamilton family acquaintances occupied the premium tables. "Amanda, I noticed the seating arrangement seems a bit unbalanced, I said carefully during one of the planning meetings I was actually invited to attend. We had to prioritize Frederick's business associates and family friends. They're important connections for James's future, she replied without looking up. But Thomas is your only uncle. Couldn't he be seated closer to the family table? This prompted a sigh from both Amanda and Catherine. Margot jumped in with practiced diplomacy. We've found that non-traditional families sometimes require creative seating solutions, she said in a tone one might use with a difficult child. Later that evening, when I tried to speak with Amanda privately about how sidelined I felt in the entire process, she cut me off. Mum, honestly, the best thing you can do is just show up, smile, and not make waves. Catherine and Margot know what they're doing. I drove home that night, with tears streaming down my face, wondering when my sweet little girl had turned into someone who could dismiss me so easily. The breaking point came during what should have been a special mother-daughter moment, the final dress fitting. I wasn't initially invited to this either, but Amanda called the night before. My final fitting is tomorrow at 1. You can come if you want, but we won't have much time for changes at this point, she said, making it sound like an afterthought. I rearranged my entire workday, cancelling 2 property showings to attend. When I arrived at the upscale bridal boutique, Catherine was already there holding court with the boutique owner, while Amanda stood on the pedestal in her gown. The dress was certainly beautiful, a hand-beaded satin creation that cost more than my first car, but something about it seemed to overwhelm Amanda's natural beauty. "Doesn't she look perfect?" Catherine asked when I entered, though her tone suggested no answer, but agreement was acceptable. "You look beautiful, honey," I said sincerely to Amanda. "Though I'm surprised you chose such a structured style. You always said you wanted something more flowing and romantic." The boutique fell silent. Amanda and Catherine exchanged glances. "This is what's fashionable now, Mum," Amanda said dismissively. "My original ideas were a bit unsophisticated." The fitting continued with Catherine directing every aspect from the veil length to the precise height of the hemline. I sat quietly on the satin couch, feeling increasingly invisible. When the stylist asked about jewellery, I saw my opportunity. "Actually," I said, reaching into my purse, "I brought something special, my grandmother's pearl necklace. She wore it at her wedding, I wore it at mine, and I thought Amanda might like to wear it too." I opened the velvet box, containing the simple but elegant strand of pearls that had been in our family for generations. Before Amanda could respond, Catherine let out a short laugh. "Darling, we've already arranged for the Morton family diamonds. The pearls are sweet, but rather basic for the look we're creating." Amanda didn't even look at the necklace before saying, "Mum, we've already decided on the jewellery. The pearls are kind of outdated and honestly a bit cheap looking for my dress." The boutique owner and attendants averted their eyes in embarrassment. I slowly closed the box, my hands shaking slightly, and returned it to my purse. For the remainder of the fitting, I sat in silence, feeling a physical pain in my chest. Afterward, I tried to speak with Amanda privately in the parking lot. "Amanda, could we talk for a minute? I feel like something has changed between us, and I hardly recognise our relationship anymore." She was texting rapidly on her phone and barely looked up. "Mum, I don't have time for a heart-to-heart right now. James is waiting and we have a million things to do." "This is important," I insisted. "I've been patient with all the changes and the way I've been sidelined in the wedding planning, but today crossed a line. The way you spoke to me in there." Amanda's head snapped up her eyes, flashing with irritation. "The way I spoke to you, maybe if you weren't so clingy and trying to force your outdated tastes into my wedding, I wouldn't have to be so direct." "Clingy Amanda, I'm your mother. I've supported everything you've ever wanted. I just want to be part of this important day." Her face contorted with an expression I'd never seen directed at me before, pure disdain. "Well, maybe I don't want your kind of help. You're embarrassing me in front of James's family with your discount store clothes and your little real estate job and your constant need for attention." I stepped back, as if physically struck. "Amanda, I don't recognize who you've become." That's when she delivered the blow that would change everything between us. "You know what you're banned from my wedding, old lady, until you apologize for trying to ruin everything with your pathetic neediness." The parking lot wasn't empty. Several people turned to stare. I noticed James standing by his car watching the scene unfold without intervention. Worse, Catherine and Frederick had emerged from the boutique and were observing with barely concealed satisfaction. Without another word, I turned and walked to my car on shaky legs. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Amanda in my rearview mirror, already being consoled by Catherine, who had an arm around her shoulders in a maternal gesture that felt like a final theft. That night, alone in the house I had worked so hard to make a home, I cried until there were no tears left. But somewhere in that darkness, something shifted inside me. The pain began to crystallize into resolve. That night, after returning from the bridal boutique, I sat alone in my living room surrounded by photographs of Amanda through the years. School plays, soccer games, graduation, all moments where I'd been her champion and support. The contrast between the smiling girl in those photos and the cruel young woman in the parking lot was stark and heartbreaking. In my bedroom, I found myself staring at the photograph of Michael and me on our wedding day. His kind eyes seemed to look directly at me across the decades. "What would you do?" I whispered to his image. "Would you let her treat you this way?" The answer came not in his voice, but in the values we had shared. Michael had been gentle but firm in his principles. He believed in kindness, but also in consequences. Most importantly, he believed people learned through experience, not lectures. "She needs to understand what she's throwing away," I said aloud to the empty room. The idea that had been forming in the back of my mind suddenly crystallized into a clear plan. The next morning I called Susan, an attorney friend, who had helped with my will and property matters over the years. "I need to understand exactly what I can and cannot legally do with my house," I explained after filling her in on the situation with Amanda. "Well, the house is solely in your name. You've never added Amanda to the deed, correct?" Susan asked. "That's right. I was planning to transfer it as a wedding gift, but nothing has been formally arranged or promised in writing. Then you have every legal right to sell it if you wish. It's your property." I thanked her and hung up, feeling both relieved and sad that this was the path I was considering. My next call was to Richard, a colleague who specialized in quick sales for motivated sellers. "I need to sell my house as quickly as possible, preferably to a cash buyer who can close rapidly," I told him. "Patricia, this is unexpected. Are you in some kind of trouble?" Richard asked with concern. "No trouble, just need a clean break and fresh start. Can you help me?" Richard hesitated, but agreed to put together a list of potential buyers known for quick cash purchases. By the end of the day, he had scheduled 3 discreet showings for serious investors. Over the next few days, I moved through my tasks methodically. During my lunch break, I opened a new bank account at a different bank from the one Amanda and I had always used. I set up a new email address and purchased a prepaid phone to use after everything was finalized. The house showings went smoothly. A real estate investor named Martin made a cash offer slightly below market value, but with a guarantee to close within 7 days and minimal contingencies. I accepted immediately. "Are you absolutely certain?" Richard asked when I signed the acceptance. "This is moving very fast." "I'm certain," I replied, thinking of Amanda's cold eyes in the boutique parking lot. With the sale in process, I began quietly packing essential items. Personal photographs, important documents, and sentimental objects went into boxes that I moved to a small storage unit I rented across town. Furniture and household items I left behind, as Martin was happy to purchase the house partially furnished, which added to its quick sale appeal. During this time, Amanda made no attempt to contact me. The wedding was now 3 weeks away, and according to the social media posts, I still had access to preparations continued without interruption. James's mother had apparently stepped fully into the mother of the bride role, accompanying Amanda to hair trials and menu tastings. 5 days after accepting Martin's offer, I sat at the closing table signing documents that would transfer ownership of my home of 18 years. With each signature, I felt a complex mix of emotions, grief for what was lost, but also a growing sense of liberation. "Congratulations," the closing agent said as she handed me the cashier's check. "Any plans for your next home? Something smaller, something that's just for me?" I replied. That afternoon, I rented a modest one-bedroom apartment in a secure building across town, paying 6 months' rent in advance. The apartment was modern, but small, with a tiny balcony overlooking a community garden. It felt appropriately sized for my new life, a life where I was no longer stretching myself thin to accommodate others' expectations. The final week before the wedding passed in a blur of practical arrangements. I moved my remaining personal items to the apartment, set up mail forwarding, and notified only my closest friends of my new contact information. I left no forwarding address at the house, wanting Amanda to experience the full impact of her actions before I revealed my new location. The only moment of wavering came when Amanda finally sent a text message 3 days before the wedding. "I suppose you can come to the wedding if you're going to be mature about everything. Wear the blue dress we picked out, not that dated burgundy one you keep talking about." No apology, no acknowledgement of her cruel words. Just a conditional invitation that still prioritized appearance over reconciliation. It strengthened my resolve to follow through with my plan. I did not respond to the text. Instead, I spent the final days settling into my new apartment and preparing mentally for the aftermath I knew would come. The sale of the house officially closed 1 week before the wedding day, perfect timing for what was to follow. On Amanda's wedding day, I woke early in my new apartment. For a brief moment, maternal instinct urged me to call her to be there for my only daughter on her important day. Then I remembered her words, her cruelty, and the way she had systematically pushed me aside for people who valued status over substance. Instead of heading to the country club where the ceremony would take place, I spent the morning arranging the last of my belongings in my new home. Around noon, my phone began to vibrate with messages and missed calls. First from Amanda. "Where are you?" "Hair and makeup starts in an hour." Then more urgently, "Mum, seriously, where are you? Catherine is trying to handle everything, but I need you here." I silenced my phone and took a walk in my new neighbourhood, finding a small cafe where I sat with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. It was strange to have time to myself, to not be at someone else's beck and call. By late afternoon, the tone of Amanda's messages had shifted from urgency to anger. "I can't believe you would ruin today to be petty and spiteful. This confirms everything I said about you." The final message came just before what would have been the ceremony start time. "Fine. Don't come. We're better off without your drama anyway." I spent the evening on my small balcony, watching the sunset, feeling an odd mixture of sadness and peace. My phone showed 15 missed calls by nightfall. I turned it off completely and went to bed early, emotionally exhausted. The next morning, Sunday, I awoke to the sound of birds outside my new bedroom window. I made coffee and was enjoying the quiet when my phone, which I had turned back on, exploded with notifications. Most were from Amanda, but there were also several from unknown numbers I suspected were James or his parents. I didn't open any of them, but the most recent text preview from Amanda caught my eye. "Where is all your stuff? What happened to the house?" So she had discovered the empty house. I imagined her and James arriving triumphantly, perhaps planning to show his parents the property they assumed would soon be theirs. Instead, they would have found an empty, clean house with no trace of my presence and no forwarding information. Throughout the day, the messages continued growing increasingly frantic and angry. "Where are you? The house is empty. What have you done? Call me immediately. You can't just disappear. Where is our stuff? Our stuff." The phrase made me shake my head at her entitled assumption. By mid-afternoon, I decided to take another walk, feeling the need for fresh air. From a discreet distance, I found myself wandering toward my old neighborhood, drawn by curiosity about what might be happening. As I approached from around the corner, I saw exactly what I had anticipated. Amanda's car parked haphazardly in the driveway, along with James's BMW and his parents' luxury SUV. Amanda and James were having what appeared to be a heated argument on the front lawn, while Frederick and Catherine stood stiffly by their vehicle faces, tight with displeasure. "What do you mean you didn't know?" James shouted, loud enough for me to hear from my position. "It was your mother's house. How could you not know she was selling it? I told you she never said anything," Amanda cried, her perfect wedding makeup now streaked with tears. "She must have done this to spite me." I watched as a neighbour approached the group, likely drawn by the commotion. After a brief exchange, Amanda's body language shifted from angry to devastated. The neighbour must have told her how long the sale had been in process. From my vantage point, I could see Catherine pull Frederick aside, both of them speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Their expressions confirmed what I suspected: the impressive family home they had expected their son to acquire through marriage was gone, and with it, their respect for the alliance. As painful as it was to see Amanda in distress, there was undeniable satisfaction in witnessing reality finally penetrate the bubble of entitlement she had constructed around herself. For the first time in years, she was facing a consequence she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of. I turned and walked back to my apartment before any of them could spot me. The real confrontation would come soon enough. It took Amanda 3 more days to track me down. I had told only one friend, Lisa, about my new address, knowing Amanda might eventually contact her. When the buzzer rang on Wednesday afternoon, I wasn't surprised to see Amanda's tear-stained face on the building's security camera. I buzzed her in and waited by my open apartment door. When the elevator doors opened, she stormed down the hallway, looking nothing like the polished bride from the social media photos posted just days earlier. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her eyes were red-rimmed, and she wore wrinkled jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual carefully selected outfit. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded, before even crossing my threshold. "You sold our house without telling me. You disappeared on my wedding day. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I gestured calmly to the interior of my apartment. "Why don't you come inside so we don't disturb the neighbours?" Her eyes widened as she took in the small, modestly furnished space. "This is where you're living now, this tiny apartment. Why would you give up our beautiful home for this? It's not tiny, it's appropriately sized for one person," I replied. "And it wasn't our home, Amanda. It was my home. The home I worked for, paid for, and maintained, which I had planned to give you as a wedding gift, until you made it clear that both it and I were inadequate for your new life." She flinched at my words, but quickly recovered. "So this was revenge, selling the house because your feelings were hurt. Not revenge, a necessary boundary. You told me I was banned from your wedding, called me an old lady, and made it abundantly clear that I embarrassed you. Why would I gift you a house worth hundreds of thousands of dollars after that?" Amanda's face crumpled slightly. "I was stressed about the wedding. You know how Catherine and Frederick can be. I didn't mean those things." "You did mean them," I said quietly. "They may have been influenced by the Hamiltons, but you meant every word. You've been pulling away and looking down on me for years now." The wedding just brought it to the surface. Before she could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at it, grimaced, and answered. "I found her. Yes, she's in some apartment across town. I don't know yet. I just got here." James's voice was audible through the speaker, though I couldn't make out his words. Whatever he said made Amanda's expression harden. "I have to call you back," she said tersely, and ended the call. Turning back to me, she took a deep breath, visibly trying to compose herself. "Mum, we need to talk about the house. James and I, we had plans. We were going to move in after the honeymoon. We'd already met with an architect about renovations. The presumption was so brazen I almost laughed. You made plans for my house without discussing them with me before I had even given it to you. You always said the house would be mine someday, she countered. Someday, yes, as a gift, not as something you were entitled to. And gifts can be reconsidered when the recipient shows contempt for the giver. Amanda's strategy shifted. Her voice softened and she moved to sit on my couch. Mum, please, we really need the house. James and we spent most of our savings on the honeymoon and some of the wedding extras his parents didn't cover. We were counting on having the house. That was unwise financial planning, I observed. Her phone rang again. This time, when she answered, her voice was sharp. I told you I'd call you back. Whatever James said in response made her stand up abruptly. No, don't come here. I'm handling it. Too late. Within 10 minutes, the buzzer rang again, and the security camera showed James looking equally dishevelled and significantly angrier than Amanda. When he entered my apartment, he didn't bother with pleasantries. Where are the house papers? He demanded. We need to see exactly what you've done. Hello to you too, James, I said calmly. The house has been sold to a new owner. The transaction was completed legally and properly. That's impossible, he sputtered. Amanda has rights to that property. It's been her family home for years. Actually, she doesn't, and it hasn't, I replied, walking to my desk and retrieving a folder. The house was solely in my name. Amanda has never been on the deed, nor has she contributed financially to its mortgage or upkeep. Here are copies of the sale documents if you'd like to review them. James snatched the folder and leafed through the papers, his face growing redder with each page. Amanda hovered nervously beside him. This can't be legal, he insisted, though his tone lacked conviction. It's completely legal. You can verify with any real estate attorney. James turned to Amanda, his expression now more accusatory than supportive. You told me the house was practically yours already. You said it was just a formality, that it would be transferred after the wedding. That's what I thought, Amanda said defensively. Mum always said. I said I intended to give it to you someday, I interjected. Intentions can change when circumstances change. James ran a hand through his hair in frustration. This is a disaster. We have nowhere to live. We can't afford to buy a comparable house, not in that neighborhood. Amanda looked genuinely surprised. But your parents? My parents aren't going to buy us a house, James snapped. They helped with the wedding because it was about appearances and connections. They've made it very clear we're on our own for living arrangements. But surely they'll help us get started, Amanda insisted, just until we find our footing. James laughed bitterly. They've offered to let us stay in their guest house temporarily, very temporarily. My father already gave me a lecture about financial responsibility and not counting on maternal handouts. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that had looked down on my little real estate job was now criticizing Amanda for expecting financial support. As I watched them argue, I saw Amanda's perfect world collapsing in real time. The charming, supportive James was revealing himself to be irritable and accusatory under pressure. The wealthy in-laws who had seemed so impressive were withdrawing their support, now that the family home they had coveted was no longer part of the equation. This is all your fault, James suddenly said, turning to me. You've deliberately sabotaged our start as a married couple. No, I said firmly. I've simply declined to reward behaviour that was disrespectful and cruel. There's a difference. Come on, Amanda, James said abruptly. We're wasting time here. We need to figure out our next steps. He headed for the door without another glance at me. Amanda hesitated, torn between following her new husband and continuing to plead her case with me. The tears that had been threatening now spilled over. I can't believe you've done this to me, she whispered. My own mother. I can't believe what you did to me, I replied softly. My only daughter, James called impatiently from the hallway. Amanda, let's go. With one last look at me, a mixture of hurt and anger in her eyes, Amanda turned and followed him. The door closed behind them with a final sounding click. I sat down on my couch, emotionally drained, but certain I had done what was necessary. The confrontation had been painful, but illuminating not just for me but for Amanda as well. Whether she realized it yet or not, she was seeing the true nature of the family she had married into and the man she had chosen. As difficult as it was, I believed this hard lesson would ultimately lead to greater wisdom for both of us. James stormed out of my apartment building, leaving Amanda behind without even checking if she was following. I watched through my window as he got into his car and peeled away from the curb tires, screeching. Amanda stood on the sidewalk, looking lost and abandoned. After several minutes, she returned to my building. The buzzer sounded again. "Can I come back up?" Her voice was small and broken through the intercom. I hesitated only briefly before pressing the button to let her in. When she reappeared at my door, the anger had drained from her face, leaving only exhaustion and defeat. "He left me here," she said, stating the obvious. "He said he needed to talk to his parents about damage control and couldn't deal with my family drama right now. You can come in," I said, stepping aside. "Would you like some tea?" Amanda nodded and sank onto my couch, looking around the apartment with new eyes, less judgmental and more observant. "It's actually nice," she said quietly. "Cozy. It suits you." I brought 2 mugs of tea to the coffee table and sat in the armchair across from her. For several minutes we sipped in silence, the weight of years of misunderstandings and recent wounds hanging between us. "I don't have anywhere to go," Amanda finally said. "We checked out of the hotel this morning. All my stuff is in James's car." "You can stay here tonight," I offered. "The couch pulls out into a bed." "Thank you," she whispered, fresh tears welling in her eyes. She took a deep breath and looked directly at me. "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry for what I said to you outside the boutique. It was cruel and untrue." It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from her in years. Not the manipulative, performative kind designed to smooth things over quickly, but a real acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It hurt more than you know. I got caught up in everything the wedding James's family trying to fit in and impress them. I lost sight of what matters. Who matters?" She looked down at her wedding ring, twisting it nervously. "I just wanted so badly to belong in their world." "At the cost of the world we built together," I said gently. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. When we got to the house yesterday and found it empty, with a for sale sign already changed to sold, I was in shock. James was furious. His parents were cold. Catherine said something about how fortunate they discovered my financial instability early. "The house wasn't about punishing you, Amanda," I explained. "It was about respecting myself enough not to reward treatment that was degrading and hurtful. I've spent my entire adult life trying to give you every advantage, often at my own expense. When you banned me from your wedding and called me names, something broke. I realized I was teaching you that my love was unconditional, but also without boundaries." "So this was a lesson?" she asked, a hint of her earlier defensiveness returning. "This was a consequence," I corrected, "a natural result of your choices. In the real world, treating people poorly, especially those who love you, has repercussions. It's something I should have taught you long ago." We talked through the evening more honestly than we had in years. Amanda revealed how James's parents had subtly encouraged her to distance herself from her humble beginnings, and how their approval had become intoxicating. She admitted feeling increasingly trapped between their expectations and her own identity. "James was different when we first met," she said. "Or maybe I just didn't see who he really was. He used to be kind, funny, supportive. Now he's like a different person. People often show their true selves under pressure," I observed. When her phone rang again, later that evening, it was James, his tone noticeably conciliatory. Amanda put him on speaker. "Where are you? I've been looking everywhere," he said, though we both knew that was an exaggeration. "I'm still at my mum's apartment," she replied. "Well, come back to my parents' place. They've agreed we can stay in the guest house for a month while we figure things out." "And then what?" Amanda asked. We'll find an apartment or something, I don't know. We'll work it out. His impatience was evident, even through the phone. Amanda looked at me, then back at her phone. I think I'm going to stay at my mum's tonight. We have a lot to talk about. Are you serious? After what she did to us? James's voice rose. She deliberately sabotaged our future. She sold her own house, James. She had every right to do that. Whatever. Stay there if you want. I'll be at my parents'. The call ended abruptly. Amanda stared at her phone for a long moment. He didn't even ask if I was okay, she said quietly. The next morning, I helped Amanda find an affordable apartment of her own through some contacts in my real estate network. It wasn't in the prestigious neighborhood she had envisioned, but it was clean, safe, and within her budget if she found employment, which led to our next conversation. I don't actually have any job skills, she admitted. I majored in art history because Catherine said it was sophisticated, but I never planned on working. James said his salary would be enough. Everyone needs to be self-sufficient, I told her, not just financially, but in knowing you can take care of yourself. Through another professional connection, I helped her secure an entry-level position at a local art gallery. The pay was modest, but it was a start and aligned with her interests. Over the following months, I watched Amanda gradually reclaim her independence and sense of self. She and James attempted counseling briefly, but the fundamental cracks in their relationship couldn't be repaired. 6 months after the wedding, she filed for divorce. His parents were almost relieved, she told me over dinner at my apartment. I think they realized I wasn't the social asset they'd hoped for, without the house and the perceived family wealth. And how do you feel? I asked. Lighter, she said after consideration. Like I can breathe again, like I'm finding the real me beneath all the pretense. 1 year after the wedding, we celebrated Thanksgiving together in my apartment. Amanda arrived carrying a homemade pie, slightly lopsided, but made with care. I followed Grandma's recipe, she said with a shy smile. It might not be perfect, but I made it myself. As we sat down to our modest but warm holiday meal, I reflected on the difficult journey we'd travelled. The pain had been necessary for growth, both hers and mine. I had learned to establish healthy boundaries, and she had learned that true worth isn't measured by social status or material possessions. I'm proud of you, I told her as we cleaned up after dinner. Not just for getting back on your feet, but for finding the courage to be authentic. I learned it from you, she replied. It just took me a while to appreciate the lesson. The road to healing our relationship continues. There are still moments of tension, old patterns that threaten to re-emerge. But the foundation is stronger now, built on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. Sometimes we need to lose what we have to truly appreciate what matters. For Amanda, it took losing the material security and social status she thought she wanted to discover her own strength and values. For me, it took nearly losing my daughter to find the courage to stand up for myself while still leaving room for reconciliation. Love doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes true love means tough choices and painful consequences that ultimately lead to growth. What about you? Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? Did it ultimately strengthen or weaken your relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, it's never too late to reset boundaries and rebuild relationships on healthier foundations.